Baker Mayfield led one of the best fantasy offenses in the NFL last season, but was that an outlier year or the new norm? We dig into the top 3 storylines for the Buccaneers entering the 2025 season on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com. Check us out. We'll have you all set for the schedule release coming up on Wednesday night.
Ooh, that's going to be so fun. I love getting the schedule for the NFL and just digging through all of that. I'm a big nerd that way, but I am excited for Wednesday night to get that information. Now, today we're going to continue on with going through the top 3 storylines for every NFL team. And this week we're on the NFC South. So we already talked about the Saints on yesterday's show. We're going to talk about a much more exciting fantasy team today, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were the number 3 fantasy offense in the league last year, behind only the Lions and the Bengals. I mean, just a lot of great weapons for them. And that was with them dealing with a lot of injuries too, with Mike Evans missing some games and Chris Godwin missing half a season, and, rolling with a rookie running back for the second half of the year. So it's definitely a very exciting offense, but a harder one to figure out if they can replicate it next season, because we got to start here with the top storyline. Is, can Baker Mayfield have back-to-back top 5 seasons? Because 2024 was by far an outlier year for him. He was a quarterback 4 overall and in points per game, behind only Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. Right now he's sitting at quarterback 6 in consensus ranks for the 2025 fantasy drafts, behind Josh Allen, Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow, which I definitely think it's fair those 5 guys are ahead of him. It's just, is that too high for Baker? Can he perform like he did last year when he threw 41 touchdowns, and now he has another new offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see where you go when you're going into the pocket passers, right? I think really you go Lamar Jackson, Josh, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels get into the picture, right? But then where do you go after that when you go to the, quote, pure pocket passers? Mayfield is not that, because he ran and gave you some numbers that way last year. He's more athletic, and he's like Joe Burrow, where he can run when he needs to pad the stats and score touchdowns, right? So Baker Mayfield is an athletic pocket passer, so he's kind of a tweener, right? He's not going to give you that straight designed run, take off, and score on tush pushes and things like that. But he's not a zero. He's going to extend plays, push things downfield, and also take off in key moments when he needs to. So I think it's fair to put him right there with Joe Burrow, because there are a lot of question marks once you start getting out of that little corridor, I would say, of quarterbacks. So when we look at that, I mean, yeah, he's lining up as top 6. I mean, that's why he's at 6, right? I mean, right there with those guys. I think Burrow might have more consistency with his numbers as we go forward when he's healthy. But you look at Baker Mayfield, we weren't sure, right, when they made the transition from Dave Canales to Liam Cohen, like what it was going to do for Baker Mayfield, because he looked so good with Canales. Well, it turned out it was a better move, Liam Cohen. Now, they've actually promoted him. This is actually a guy that we should know a lot more about, and I love his name. Josh Grizzard is the offensive coordinator. Yeah, we hope he's an offensive wizard. He's also from Lizard Lick, North Carolina, but he also went to Yale. So he's really smart, like Mike McDaniel. So he is one of those new school offensive coordinators who's going to look at it and say, look, we got receivers. He sees what we see, which is great, right? We want more people to do this. We've got receivers. Baker's red hot. He's coming off this. We need to throw the ball downfield. It's working. We won 5 straight division titles, transitioning from the GOAT Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. Why mess with what they're doing, right? I think a lot of those concepts, and the best thing about Grizzard is also he was there, Liam Cohen. He was the pass game coordinator. So really it's a transition, quote, a new OC for Baker Mayfield, but it's really with someone he's familiar with. And same thing with Liam Cohen. He was familiar with him during a short period with the Rams, and we saw how that relationship blossom. So some things might say there's a lot of newness on his team, but it's good new, where he has a good schematic help here. And then you look at just the receivers. We know they added Emeka Egbuka with the first round pick. So he's got all kinds of weapons with his veterans all coming back. So look, again, it's really just it's a personal preference when you got down to Burrow versus Mayfield, right? It's just determining who will need to throw more. We know the Bengals stunk defensively, so I guess you factor that in, right? Are the Bucs a little bit better? But they're also taking some hits defensively. They're a bit of a transitional team there for Todd Bowles. They need to rely on the offense. So this could be a really pass-heavy team. So I like it with Baker Mayfield. So again, these are all positive changes. The touchdowns, they're hard to come by, right? Getting 40 touchdowns in a season back-to-back is hard. But can we say 35 are in the mix? Yeah, absolutely. I think you should throw for 35 touchdowns.
Even if your name's Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, it's hard for them to throw for 40 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons or on a consistent basis. So, yeah, that would be a really high expectation for him. But it's really impressive that he threw the 41 when I brought up the injuries. Mike Evans had 11 touchdowns in 14 games played. K. Dotton only, was second on the team in targets. And now, that's just should not be happening this year with all of this really talented wide receiver room that they have with Chris Godwin coming back from injury. Emeka Egbuka, like you said, a first-round pick. Jalen McMillan coming into his second year. McMillan had 8 touchdowns last year and really didn't get going to the second half of the year. When you're adding in Chris Godwin, who had 5 touchdowns in 7 games played, and you're adding in Emeka Egbuka, it doesn't seem crazy to me to think Baker Mayfield should be throwing 35 touchdowns next year. And the change in OC, I agree with you. I think it's great that it's someone that's from within, and it was a passing game coordinator, a guy that already had his hands in the success of the passing game success of Baker. And then you also brought up the rushing yards, and maybe that was also an outlier year, but it worked so well. Whenever he was in trouble, he just scrambled, and he kept getting first downs, and Baker's not going to be scared to get hit. He's a tough man. So I don't think that changes. I think he just pulled out another part of his game. But that was the very first season he ever had more than 165 rushing yards in a season. He had 378, so more than double. So maybe that does come down a bit, but it did seem like, especially towards the end of the year, he just unlocked something. He was like, oh man, I could just scramble anytime I need to. Maybe he won't need to as much now, though, because of how many weapons he does have. There were those few games where he was playing without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin, and he didn't have Emeka, and he was playing with Jalen McMillan in his rookie year. So maybe that goes down a little bit, but it's hard not to have Baker Mayfield as a top 6-7 guy again, because you brought up comparing him to the other pocket passers. Maybe would you rather take a shot on Justin Herbert, taking a leap forward with Jim Harbaugh and passing more this year, or go with Baker?
I think I go with Baker. I think he's also safer. I think he might have the safer floor and a same ceiling, right? So that's how I look at it. I'm a little bit more into having a guaranteed person, where Herbert could be very volatile from week to week, especially because that team looks like it's built to run more than anything else and want to run with Greg Roman, where we know the philosophy, again, when you promote the passing game coordinator, we're pass happy team last year. You got a bunch of receivers. We don't need to figure this out. They're going to throw the ball. I think that's what I like about it, where I don't want to get in the mind of Greg Roman and seeing if you can get a Lamar Jackson type season with Justin Herbert. I don't see that necessarily materializing where he's the dual threat at that level. So again, it comes down to me for Burrow versus Mayfield. You could also look at, is Jalen Hurts going to take a down swing ever with those short touchdowns? Because if that happens, then you would like Burrow and Mayfield ahead of him, because if he doesn't get those, it's a lot different with those numbers. But right now we can't predict that either. So again, they're right there on the cusp again. But the bottom line is you're going to have to pay this price in the top 5, top 6 to get him. And it's also reasonable. So you're not going to get a discount, but you can also feel good that your pick is going to pay off at that level, and you're going to get those numbers that match that draft pick with Baker Mayfield.
And it's interesting because we also love his running back. That's going to be hopefully the starter next year, we're all assuming. But Bucky Irving, as he enters his second season, he has massive expectations right now, ranked as the running back 8. We will let you know if we're buying into that, and is he ready to have that big of a season that everyone's expecting? We'll discuss right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs, the twists and turns continue. Unfortunately for the Boston Celtics, they had a big blow with Jason Tatum going down with a season and playoff-ending injury. So the New York Knicks are looking good here to get Eastern Conference Finals. We know the similar thing has happened here with the Timberwolves, Steph Curry going down with a hamstring injury. So there's a lot of excitement left here with the conference finals, just a lot of surprises there. And every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't miss moments. But it's a game-winning shot of breakout player. There's never been a better time to get into the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live bets as well. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have even more ways to play smart and win big. Check it out. We're going to see one of the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, or the rest step up here to make this a series against the Knicks. We're also seeing some of the Warriors rally a little bit, but they're down 3-1. So you can figure it out what you want to do there with the live prop bets. And the action is going to unfold very well here. So check it out. If you got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with the same game parlay? There's always going to be a replacement stepping up there. How could a $200 in bonus bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? I think it really will here. Just check it out. If you're new to FanDuel, that's exactly what you'll get. It's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you would get $200 in bonus bets coming your way. Make every moment more with FanDuel, sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show, and the only thing that could cut in a lot to Baker Mayfield's touchdowns is Bucky Irving touchdowns, which we would also take. This is why this team was so fantasy explosive last year. Now, let's look at Bucky Irving. I mean, I love the name Bucky. It's my favorite travel stop. Now it's one of my favorite fantasy running backs. RB8 in consensus ranks right now when you look at his value. So right there among the RB1s. He was the RB19 on average, but RB14 total. So he's on the cusp of being a top 12 running back last year when you go wire to wire with the season. So I like it. And he only had 45.7% of the snaps. He was still playing well behind Rachaad White early in the season and throughout when you look at the offensive usage. But his opportunities went through the roof. He was a better power back and scorer. So, look, I'm excited about Bucky Irving. Again, I think he's another guy that may not miss. If you take him at your value, we're looking for value or someone going to be a downside guy. I see him right to there, giving you exactly what you want.
Yeah, I'm not worried about his snap percentage from last year because that was the full year. It took him time to take over that backfield, took him time to, get Rachaad White on the bench a little bit more. But by the second half of the year, it was him who led that backfield consistently. And then once we got to the wild card round, he played nearly 70% of the snaps in that game, 68%. Well, Rachaad White was at 38%. So I do think the takeover has officially happened. From weeks 10 through 18, he was a running back 7 in fantasy points per game, behind only Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, and Chase Brown during that span. So I'm completely fine with his running back 8 rank. And the two guys right ahead of him, I actually think I would be fine taking Irving over Devon Achane or Christian McCaffrey, right? McCaffrey, if we knew he was going to be healthy all year, then you're going to take McCaffrey, but that's really the issue with him. I do think the 5 at the top with Saquon Barkley, Bijan, Gibbs, Genty, and Derrick Henry are still the better options to go with over Irving. But Irving right there, I mean, that's where I start to think about him is at running back 6. He had 8 games last year with 10 plus carries. And in those 8 games, he averaged nearly 19 fantasy points per game, 18.7. And 7 of those 8 games came from week 10 and on. So that's really when he started to take over. To compare those fantasy numbers, Bijan Robinson averaged 18.3 points per game last year as a running back 4. And when Bucky Irving was used as the lead back, again, 18.7 points per game. So I'm really excited about what this kid can do. They seem to be all in on him. I won't be surprised if Rachaad White is like a random cut guy, a guy that they released in training camp. But even if he is there, I really don't care because I do think Bucky Irving is just taking over this backfield. And it's also great. He gets the receptions too, because he can be that receiving back as well.
Yeah, and let's also look at this a little bit deeper in relation to White. I mean, White got 55.7% of snaps, and that didn't phase Bucky Irving in producing. He also was reasonable in fantasy. He was the RB24 in total scoring there, White. And this is despite what Irving was doing, an RB27 average. So White could come into play at best as a flex play. I'm not saying all the numbers duplicate here. We figure the snaps will be flipped. So we figure Irving is on his way up and White is on his way down. But Michelle makes a good point. They might be comfortable, right? If they like Sean Tucker or whatever, they say, look, we don't really need to pay Rachaad White. We've got Irving on a trajectory here. He's leading our offense. So that would obviously bump up Irving. I don't know how much more he can get up from that RB6 area, especially with all those big names and feature workhorses that you mentioned, Michelle. But it just means that you're going to have better value and maybe want to invest in a running back a little bit earlier versus another position. So I love it. I mean, he's just a guy that could do the things that Rachaad White couldn't do. That means power running, be efficient as a runner, following his blockers. Those are things that White has never done. And keep in mind, White is still a holdover from the Tom Brady era. They wanted a receiving guy at that time. Well, he did his job then, right, with Leonard Fournette, but now they have their version of Fournette being the power back that they want, like they had there with that 1-2 punch. And I think it's not even. It's Irving and then White well down below. So I'm excited about this. And again, we'll have to see. Let's just hope there's enough touchdowns to go around for Bucky and Baker. Just make it happen, and we're good. And look, go double digits, push to 35 to 40 for Baker. We're happy. We'll be really happy with that combination.
That's the biggest worry, right? Is that do they hurt each other? Where we need Baker to throw a lot, we need Bucky to throw or to score a lot, but also at the same time, I mean, Bucky Irving thrived last year in the second half of the season, while Baker Mayfield was thriving. Like there is room for both. We just need this offense to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. For both a quarterback to be a top 5 guy and a running back to be a top 8 guy, they're going to have to be one of the best offenses, which we saw last year. And now maybe with losing Liam Cohen, they do struggle. But we brought up that the defense is still expected to not be too great. They're going to have to score a lot of points. They play in an easy division that there's going to be a lot of high as well. All the teams stink, especially on defense. So I do just think Bucky Irving is going to get 65+% of the snaps this year. I think that's plenty for him with the receiving work, with the goal line work. And he is, I think, one of the safer options to take here in the top 10. One question for you. Would you go Bucky Irving or Josh Jacobs? Because Jacobs also doesn't play an insane amount of snaps either. It's like Matt LaFleur likes to use kind of a rotation with Jacobs being the lead. I think I lean Irving.
Yeah, we've already seen Josh Jacobs the year after he gets a big workload. It's not as great, right? And he's a little bit older, and I want to go with fresher legs, a guy that didn't still see the majority of the snaps, right? I know we do think that Jacobs is a guy that maybe is used a little bit more, I guess, managing his workload a little bit with the Packers, but still – you go to the past with the Raiders, he's got a lot of mileage that Bucky Irving simply does not have. So I'm all in on Bucky over Josh Jacobs. I think you mentioned those guys ahead, and I think those might be the only guys I would take ahead of Irving at this point.
Now, the most confusing part to figure out about this Buccaneers offense going into next year is the wide receiver room. Now, we know Mike Evans is going to put up 1,000 yards, probably somewhere between 7 to 12 touchdowns, right? So like he's not so confusing, but will his targets go down with this really, really crowded room? And Chris Godwin, will he stay healthy? And Emeka Egbuka being a rookie, how much playing time will he get in target share? And then are they just going to throw Jalen McMillan to the side? Because he was super impressive last year as a rookie when he got a chance at the end of the season. So a lot of things to discuss here. We'll get to that to finish up today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's finish up our Buccaneers storylines by talking about this absolutely stacked wide receiver room. Right now, going through the consensus ranks for 2025 drafts, Mike Evans is currently sitting as the wide receiver 15, which is probably too low for him because he was the wide receiver 9 last year on average and total, and then the wide receiver 8 on average in 2023. But that's what Mike Evans is, consistently overlooked, but also like we know exactly what we're going to get from him. And then you got Chris Godwin down there at wide receiver 28. He's the next most expensive wide receiver for the Buccaneers. Jalen McMillan going into his second season is still a little bit more costly than their rookie. He's at wide receiver 54, but still very, very cheap. And then Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver 58. He was drafted in the first round this year with the Buccaneers. I loved him coming out of Ohio State, but unfortunately he's joining a team that has a super, super crowded room, and it's going to be hard for him to get targets, kind of like Jackson Smith-Njigba entering the Seahawks wide receiver room a couple years ago, like Roma Dunze in the Bears offense with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore last year, and they both struggled in the rookie season. So that's kind of our worry there. But let's start with Mike Evans. What are your thoughts on him? Do you think wide receiver 15 is fair, too low, too high?
Yeah, everyone expects him to drop off at some point, right? With the hamstring injuries and the age, but he's just a guy that's an all-timer. He's now, with last season's work and hitting milestones and the Baker Mayfield era, like he's really done well. I mean, looking at Jameis Winston to Tom Brady to Mayfield, he's been reliable, consistent as it gets. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. He's a great guy off the field as well. So everyone trusts him. Everyone loves him in Tampa. His teammates love him. He's just a Buck through and through. And I think you look at it, look, he's not going to suddenly slow down because I know a lot of other receivers do, but he's not like other receivers. So we haven't seen anyone this consistent ever to start his career with 1,000 yards and being able to score double-digit touchdowns. Now, as Michelle said, you know what you're going to get with Mike Evans. There's going to be some duds. There's going to be some games where he gets erased by a corner, but then there's going to be some games where he has 2 touchdowns or he makes 2 long plays to score on the outside from Baker Mayfield. But however you look at it, him and Mayfield have great chemistry, and this is on top of him having good chemistry with Winston or Brady. I think it's even better with Mayfield because they both are in that mindset of get open downfield. Mayfield likes to extend plays. You see him, I can just picture him now. Like when he runs out, he kind of points downfield and say, get open, I'm going to find you. That happens. He can also trust him in the red zone. So again, Mike Evans, I don't know if we want to just anoint one of the more underrated players. He could be, right? Everyone doesn't think of him as a Hall of Famer. And
He's
also
definitely a Hall of Famer. I mean,
yeah, it's silly that people don't think he is, but he's a consistent fantasy, like us in fantasy know. I mean, when you put 1,010 every single year and you lock it in, you're going to be a great fantasy asset, and no player does that very well. So, look, Mike Evans is still elite. I think 15 is a steal right now. I think you would still take him in the top 12 if he finished 9 last year. Even if he drops off, he's still a wide receiver 1. But got to take advantage of that value. One of the better values continually on the board here.
I mean, he's a great value here. It's never an exciting pick, but he's scored 14 fantasy points per game in 3 of the last 4 seasons, including each of the last 2. He has at least 11 touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 seasons, with 13 of them in 3 of the last 4, or 3 of the last 5. Sorry. And it's just, you know, what you're going to get from him. The touchdowns will be there, especially if we're expecting Baker Mayfield to throw 35 again. Then Mike Evans is getting his double digits again. And yeah, maybe the target share won't be as much as we want, and maybe he hits just 1,000, but those touchdowns will make up for it. And he's going to come through on the wide receiver 15 cost is what we pretty much know, unless he hits that age wall because he is getting older, but I doubt it for this year. Now, Chris Godwin, I mean, last season before the ankle injury, it was he got hurt in week 7, but he was the wide receiver 2 in average scoring. And now 2 big games kind of push that up. But I mean, really, most of these games were very, very good for Chris Godwin. He was getting the targets. He was getting the production. He was scoring touchdowns. Does that keep up without Liam Cohen? And then did they draft Emeka Egbuka to be Chris Godwin's replacement, right? Are they worried about him being able to stay healthy? Are they worried about his production? Maybe this is his last year there. But if Godwin were to go down, does he get his job back? There's those questions. What are your thoughts on Chris Godwin?
Yeah, I mean, he is coming off an ankle injury, and I don't love kind of the narrative that they're hopeful he'll be ready for week 1. I thought he was going to be ready for week 1. So maybe they're hedging their bets a little bit and know they're a contending team, so they need to have a replacement on hand immediately. And when I say replacement, Egbuka is that guy, because when you look at what happened with Chris Godwin the year before, Dave Canales, he was poorly used. I mean, I look at it and I don't know why you would think you want to play this guy outside. He's been a great slot receiver going back to Brady and Winston. And he was in 2023 was only in the slot 32% of the time. That shot up all the way to 57%. Oh, he's back at his comfort level. Let's use him where he belongs. And boom, the production is back to where we're looking for. So I think we didn't know that for sure, but that was good on Liam Cohen to recognize that and get him back in the slot. Now, the interesting thing is McMillan picked up his production, right? In essence, I mean, he actually had 17.4 points per game in the final 5 games at half-point PPR. He was a wide receiver 46, but that was because he wasn't used much early in the year when they had Evans and Godwin on the field. But he was only in the slot 22% of the time. He's not a slot replacement. They kind of adjusted their offense a little bit with their personnel to do that, with K. Dotton and all that, to make up for the fact they didn't have Godwin. But McMillan's presence was key early for Godwin because they could put him in the slot and do that. Now, when you look at Egbuka, this guy, I look him back, and he actually played 81% of his snaps in the slot at Ohio State. I mean, that's what he did, but Ohio State also has great outside receivers at any given time, so that also factored into it. But he's a reliable route runner. So if we have another situation where Godwin is hurt, that'll be an interesting thing, right, to see between McMillan and Egbuka. If they go to 11 personnel, who gets those inside snaps? I would say it's Egbuka because that's his skill set and ranking, but that doesn't say he'll be the more productive guy, right? It could say that we're going to put this guy inside to make sure there's a threat, and we have Evans and McMillan again doing what they do here to replace Godwin's production. So again, Godwin's health is kind of the key to everything here, but I think on paper we'd say this is much like the JSN thing in Seattle where we had to have Tyler Lockett go and DK Metcalf fade. DK Metcalf is gone. 2 years later, JSN is the number 1 clear receiver in Seattle. So it may be some time with Egbuka, but I would say right now, Godwin is still the guy you draft based on his value, but make sure he's healthy. And then I would go McMillan next and then Egbuka. So kind of the order, but pay very close attention to Godwin's health because that is going to change things up on the way we might look at this receiving core very quickly.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. Like maybe Chris Godwin could be a trade candidate in the middle of the year too, if Egbuka is showing the team that like he can step into that role. I do think we probably have to wait till 2026 to see Egbuka's like true ceiling and get the best value out of him. But if something were to happen to Chris Godwin, for sure. But yeah, probably in just your redraft drafts, if Chris Godwin's healthy, he's there. He made it through training camp. It's going to be hard to take Egbuka with one of the you got smaller benches in these redraft leagues. But Egbuka, we like him for the future, just not so much for 2025. That will be it for today. We will be back tomorrow talking about the Carolina Panthers, who are surprisingly a pretty exciting fantasy offense, possibly all of a sudden. So looking forward to talking to you about that then. Please don't miss it. And then hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you're watching, or give us a like, review on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.